Let's get ready to rumble. It's showtime. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Valuation Masterclass Debates. Today, we are going to have a showdown on the company AMD. Before we get started, let me introduce our debaters. First, we've got Ayush, who is on the buy side of this argument, and Hamid, who is on the sell side. I'll just introduce them briefly. Ayush graduated from Boot Camp 16, coming from Mumbai. He's cleared level 1 for CFA, and he's pursuing a master's in AI at IIT Bombay, where he explores AI-driven research in the financial sector, bridging the gap between technology and finance. And Hamid from Houston, Texas. It's early in the morning there. He's a Six Sigma black belt, economist, data science, and process improvement specialist with 15 years leading data-driven information and transformations in tech, distribution, healthcare, and government. And he founded Ethos Sync, helping small businesses solve problems with low-cost, open-source technology. And without further ado, I'm going to bring the two of them onto the show, and we're going to have a quick chat before we kick off. All right, Hamid and Ayush, how are you guys doing?
Doing well. Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Amazing.
And did you hear what I was saying? I'm just curious, did that come through? I don't know if that does come
Yes.
through. It did come through,
Yes.
so you could hear
Yes,
it.
I
Okay,
did.
great.
Yes.
I was worried because I did it before, and I thought, I don't know if the other debater heard it in the last one, but that's good. Well, I want to welcome you to the Valuation Masterclass Debates. You guys are brave, and I think that you've got some strong arguments. But before we get started, maybe just briefly, tell us about how you're feeling and, what's going on there today as you're preparing for this debate.
Ayush, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So it's amazing. Like only yesterday I got graduated from masterclass professional, and it's exciting to come on and have a debate with Hamid. Like he's so experienced in the field, and it's a great opportunity for me to learn and actually apply what I have learned through the entire masterclass and have a real sense of how it works out in the real life.
That's exciting. And yeah, I mean, that's what it's about, is how do we apply what we're learning? And that's why it's been my dream to come up with these debates. So I really am excited about it, because also we're all on the same team. We're searching for knowledge. We're searching for the truth. And we know in the markets, nobody knows the truth, so we're all trying to figure it out. Hamid, what about yourself?
Yeah, I love these kinds of environments. I got excited when you posted that you were going to do a versus. I think we briefly talked about it last year, doing some type of versus. So this was really good to prepare for. As I shared with you two, I had to start at 3:45 in the morning just to get ready. So I'm excited.
Oh, man. Well, I think you're going to be ready. So let me just go through the rules of the game for the audience here. The debate is going to have an opening argument where each participant gets 3 minutes to present their case. Then we're going to have a rebuttal round where each side has 3 minutes to counter the opponent's arguments. And then we're going to have a Q&A session where you, the audience, can ask questions, I can ask questions, and also you guys can ask questions of each other. Then we're going to have closing statements. Each participant gets 3 minutes to summarize their position. And the beauty of this whole thing is that if you're interested in the stock AMD, you're going to get definitive arguments on either the buy or the sell side. Now, before we start off, I just want to go through a few things to talk about AMD, of kind of what's the latest with the company. So AMD, of course, is a leading semiconductor company known for its high-performance CPUs and GPUs. The CPUs, of course, are the brains of a computer, whereas the GPUs are a special processor designed for handling graphics, rendering images, and accelerating tasks that require massive parallel computing, such as AI and video processing, like the AI request you made today on ChatGPT. So the company is competing with industry giants like Intel and NVIDIA, and AMD has gained market share through innovations, strategic acquisitions, and advancements in AI and data centers. Before we go into more on that, let's just understand the core business is mainly data centers, which is driving about 49% of revenue. And the gaming sector is driving about 10% of revenue. And then also we've got another 14% coming from embedded processors. Now, I didn't mention also that PCs is about 27%. Now, before we go further, let's look at some technicals and some fundamentals about the company. Here we can see, going back to February 2020, just before COVID, and was hitting in March, we can see the share price at about 50. It went all the way up to 200 in the beginning, or let's say the ending of 2023, but it's been sliding from that 200 now back down to about 125 or something like that. And so now what we can do is look at the consensus. Right now there's 50 analysts covering the company, and the average consensus recommendation is 2.2, which would basically mean that it's a buy. It's not a strong buy and it's not a hold. And we can see that the target price by consensus is an upside of 37%. And ultimately, revenue is expected to grow by consensus by about 20% in 2016, and profit to grow, or let's say net margin to widen to about 26%. And let's look at the company on my world-class benchmarking scorecard. What we can see is 2020 and 2021 was fantastic. It was ranked a number one on profitable growth at the top of the triangle. But then things fell apart in 2022 and 2023. In fact, the expense control of the company fell down, margins fell, and volumes fell. But it's recovered in the past 12 months as we've seen revenue growth starting to recover, which is driving EPS growth and has brought the profitable growth score to a 5. So right now, it's average performance when compared against 600 info tech companies that are large worldwide. We can look at our global stock tracker, and if you haven't gotten it, you should sign up for it, because on that global stock tracker, I update it every single week and send it out to everybody. And you can see here that the company's got a net profit margin of about 6.4. Now, this is the past 12 months, and a ROA of 2.1, so relatively small. Price to book is at 3, which is pretty low for a tech company, considering that the tech industry is at 28.8. PE can sometimes be misleading if earnings come down really low. Companies, a net debt company, but also the beta is very high. Let's look at that in a little bit more detail. Here we can see I've rebased the EPS of the company to 100 back in 2021, and we can see that it's gone up from 100 to 133. Not much great growth there, only 33% over those 3 years. Let's look at their competitors. Holy moly, NVIDIA has gone up profits. This is profits. EPS of NVIDIA's gone up from 100 to 672. So more than a 500% increase, whereas Intel has gone from 100 down to minus 89. Intel's in a bit of trouble. So this gives you a little background, and now it's time to let the games begin. Let's move into our first round, which is the opening round. And I think that we're going to have Ayush start that, right? Ayush, you ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Ready.
Amit, I'm going to take you out of the screen, and as you said,
Sounds
you
good.
heard it, so hopefully you'll hear that. It shouldn't be a problem. So let me do that right now, and then I'll bring you back in when it's your turn. All right.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to take myself out while you do your presentation, and I'll come back in a second. So go ahead and start.
Sure. Yeah. So let's begin with the story of AMD. I have 4 major points that will summarize the entire view of why I think AMD is going to boost up. My first and the most major concern is the two lens through which investors are looking at AMD, and the concern is both the lenses are broken. So lens number 1 is the lens of Nvidia, where people are comparing AMD to Nvidia and entirely AMD to Nvidia, forgetting the other businesses that AMD is currently in. And the second lens is the lens of Intel versus AMD. Again, AMD, people are looking at the declining sector because the leading player in that sector, which is Intel, is going down, and hence people and investors are bullish on that, even when AMD is having a great growth in the client side of the business, taking up significant market share from Intel. My second point is in the AI race. So recently, when DeepSeek came out and have proven to do the same amount of AI computations with very less resource, or let's say an optimized value chain for the entire AI training. It while Nvidia is a clear market leader in this segment, and it has very high performance, high compute GPUs like the Blackwell series. Smaller players like AMD, which AMD is currently the second in this entire system, they have AMD is having value for money on this GPU. And earlier, while big companies like Google, Microsoft, and big research lab funded by national grants are only in the business of training on the GPUs, now smaller players can kick in because the cost of the GPU, the optimization required and the AI resource required is significantly lowered, and hence companies like AMD can pitch themselves in way faster than what Nvidia can do. My third point is, if you have asked me about AMD, let's say a year back when its stock price was almost 30% above this, I would have said it is a sell. But since then, AMD has corrected its price significantly. I'm not saying it's anyways compared to what Nvidia is, but if you see the stock price of AMD right now, it's very less. It's very cheap. And if you are a contrarian view, or if you are a general investor, you always look to buy the stock at the point when it is at its best value premium. And I think it's trading at a deep discount. And right now, it's the best time to buy AMD. My last point is currently that AMD is having a really great team. So Lisa Su, if I am building a team where I am looking to compete with Nvidia, I think Lisa Su is the best CEO that I would pick in. So in the 10 years of her being the CEO of AMD, for almost 8 years, AMD has seen positive revenue growth, and more than 5 of those 10 years, it has seen more than 20% revenue growth. So I think that's my point. I think this is the right time to buy AMD. It's at a deep discount, and yeah, that's it from my side.
All right, excellent arguments, and I like your idea of the lens. I think that was interesting about the lens number one, NVIDIA versus AMD, and lens number two, Intel versus AMD. That was interesting. So now I'm going to take you out and bring in Hamid to present his arguments. All right, hold on. All right, Hamid, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
All right, I'm going to exit, and then I'm going to turn on my timer here. So hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm going to exit now, and then take it away.
All righty. So appreciate the uses points on the buy side. On the sell side, I have a different perspective. I'm not looking at the growth. I'm looking at the financials. Number one, inventory pileups signals weak sales. AMD's inventory persistence and high days inventory outstanding are showing some slow moving stock. That's the pre-AI along with an existing AI. And that's coupled with dropping payables to inventory ratios. It's been dropping the last 4 quarters where its competitor NVIDIA has been climbing. And this indicates that inventory outpaces AP. And so now you have unsold chips accumulating. They also have elevated AP that's masking the cash strain, in my opinion. They've got an accounts payable reliance with a declining payables to inventory ratio. That suggests to me there's some cash flow issues going on, essentially forcing the suppliers to pay for that inventory growth. There's a sales lag on inventory as well. There's weak revenue, in my opinion, versus NVIDIA's strong sales growth. So to me, I think AMD chips aren't selling as well as we see in terms of the top side performance. And again, this is exacerbated by the low turnover and falling payable support. And then if you put this all together, essentially what I think is going on is we're eventually going to see a poor cash flow utilization. You got weak operating cash flows with declining payables to inventory flags. To me, that looks as the beginning of financial strain, maybe the reason why we see AMD dropping now and we don't know where the bottom is. So AMD is leaning on accounts payable as inventory grows, unlike NVIDIA's financial cash strength.
All right. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to show the share price chart again. And is there any correlation between that inventory pileup that you're talking about, or the AP and those types of lags, to what's happening with the share price, or is that disconnected to this?
I think it's related. In fact, where I'm getting this from is I ran a regression examining the inventory as the Y and looking at various predictors. And what I found was some statistical significance within AP, within days inventory outstanding, within the cash flows. And so what I'm seeing is there seems to be a false presentation in terms of how we value the growth versus how we're actually driving that growth in inventory, that ever climbing growth in inventory. And when you compare it to NVIDIA, you see two different stories.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's good presentation. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to take you out for a moment, and then I'm going to bring in Ayush to do his rebuttal. All right. Well, you've heard the points there. Yeah. Very different angle that he's coming from. You guys are coming from different angles, which I think is making an interesting debate. So now I'm going to start the timer as soon as you start. You got 3 minutes for your rebuttal. But before we do that, let me just make sure that everybody understands that this rebuttal round is sponsored by, and the whole debate is sponsored by, Valuation Masterclass Debate is sponsored by Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. If you want to build a competitive advantage in company valuation like Ayush and like Hamid, then join us at valuationmasterclass.com. All right, Ayush, are you ready to rock?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to take myself out and then take it away.
Yeah. So again, like Hamid said, there's a concern of inventory and accounts payable lagging up. But my main point over here is right now. So I start with the second point that I presented earlier, that DeepSeek, since it was launched, it presented a efficient way, or let's say a less computational requirement way to train AI models. Now, what this is doing, earlier where there was big players like Google, Microsoft, and big AI research labs funded by national grants who have very high budgets to invest in these GPUs. They are going after best of the best, and the best currently over here is NVIDIA. So when such a thing is happening, AMD to a certain extent is being sort of neglected. But now when DeepSeek has presented this computationally efficient way, there are small startups and small research labs, small players who will now ramp up their AI training capabilities in-house. And for them, for the startups, the best thing is they don't want the best in the business. They want what is value for their money. And I have a strong belief that AMD's GPU, as also given the market, is more value for money if you compare at the lower context. So for me, I think the market is fragmented. Like the upper market share is already taken by Nvidia. I'm not saying it's completely dominated by Nvidia, but there are substantial chains that is being created, substantial market that is being created now, where there would be opportunity for players like AMD. And for that, AMD has recently acquired ZT, where the plan for it is to compete in inferential GPUs, which is different from model training GPUs. And AMD wants to solidify its niche segment over here. My second point is, again, if you look at all the debates, the main question is, the only thing we are looking is AMD versus NVIDIA, and completely ignoring 30% of the business, which is Intel versus AMD. And over here, AMD is gaining significant market shares from Intel. Its revenue growth is almost 50% increased year on year when we look at the client segment. Also, when we look at the AI data center business, its revenue is grown 70% year on year. Again, so these are fabulous numbers, beating analyst consensus. But again, when we look at the two broken lenses, everything look blurrish, and that's why we are seeing such a fall in AMD stock price, which is, in my strong opinion, is going to rise again.
Excellent. Okay, so the concept of less demanding or more computationally efficient way is now going to open up smaller houses that are going to buy AMD instead of having to go out and get NVIDIA. And again, you've said that the lens is wrong to compare AMD versus NVIDIA. It's right to compare AMD versus Intel, and AMD is gaining share in that area.
I think both the lenses is broken. So if you look at the first lens, we are seeing people comparing. People have seen AMD as the next alternative for Nvidia for quite some years. But when investors saw that AMD is nowhere near Nvidia, they have started to undervalue this, and they have completely ignored the other side. So it's two broken lenses. Both are broken. Both are blurrish. That's why we are seeing such a decrease in the price of AMD.
I'm thinking about two broken lenses on my glasses, and then I can't see clearly. So that's a good one. All right, I'm going to take you out and bring in Hamid.
Yeah,
Let's rock.
I do see the point that Ayush is making, but let's not forget that we've got two stories about chips. One is that there's this pre-AI market. We don't know how they're going to get rid of those chips. And AMD is a mixed segment versus NVIDIA, which is not. And then we'll take a look at Intel and see why they've dropped as well, because they're in a similar situation where maybe the mixed environment is not the best environment. And we know that Intel is talking about spin-offs. So I think that's where AMD might end up having to go, is where do they want to focus their growth? Gaming is not going to be growing for quite some time. We don't know how client PCs are going to be doing for quite some time. Speaking of data centers, it's in the news that they're going to sell some data centers. Maybe they'll even throw in some of their unsold stock in there just to get rid of it and to reduce their inventory. So the other component to it is the CPU to GPU story. Well, that's not a finished story. The next step is we'll probably eventually move away from CPUs and go into ARM territory. So if we go into ARM territory, it's an open market again, and NVIDIA is already ahead. Other chip makers outside of Intel, NVIDIA, and AMD are ahead. And so this is where I think the biggest problem is, which is why I'm looking at bottom line. There's problems with the inventory. There's drag on AP or elevated AP. There's drag on getting the inventory down. Days inventory outstanding is not where it needs to be. And that's the reason why I think it's a sell.
Okay. By the way, what's ARM?
ARM is a different type of chipset. So it's going to be something completely different than the CPU or the GPU. It's got a different way of talking to the kernels and the applications, but it does the same function. It processes information and sells it. And normally you're going to see ARM in your cell phones. And so we're going to see that technology, and IoT as well. We're going to see that technology really start to expand.
And are you saying that Intel and NVIDIA are better placed than AMD if it goes in ARM, or are they all at threat if it goes into this ARM territory you're talking about?
Yeah, I think Snapdragon is a good example of where ARM is really going to take off, and that's Samsung. So, and then of course TSMC is a fab producer. So that's the problem. We've got a bunch of fabless designers that are competing, and NVIDIA is taking the cake on that. And AMD is a mixed market, and they've got segments that aren't working. They're selling some data centers. They're probably going to throw in some bad inventory in there just to offload. And I think that's the reason why we see AMD just going down in the market today.
And we just got 10 seconds left. You mentioned pre-AI market. What did you mean by that? Is that inventory that they're holding that's
carried inventory that just adds on to today's inventory when we're talking about selling GPUs, and they had a ton of CPUs before that.
Okay. Good. All right. Let's now bring you both in. All right. Good. Well, excellent work. Excellent work by both of you guys. Let's go into, before we do that, I'm just going to share my screen for a second and just let everybody know that we're now in the Q&A round. This is a Valuation Masterclass debate, and it's sponsored by Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. If you want to become an expert in company valuation in months instead of years, join us. In fact, the next one starts Monday. Woo! All right. So, yeah, exciting. We're going to have more than 40 students in the next bootcamp number 20. I'm excited to meet them all.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work.
It's going to be fun. So now we're in the Q&A sessions, and I just wanted to ask Ayush a little bit. You know, Hamid's talked about inventory and slow moving potentially inventory, and day sales outstanding and those types of measures. Are you
Yes.
concerned at all about those things, or do you think that those are not as concerning as what he thinks?
I don't think that's so concerning. So, because of one, if there is really some problem in the way AMD is approaching, it would be directly impacted in its sales number. It would plummet. It would maybe slow down, but we are not seeing that. We are seeing each of those numbers increasing and increasing fast. Like uh, I think almost 70% in the data center business and almost 50% in the client's business. The number is increasing. I think. This inventory is more sort of AMD's way, because there is a huge demand in the market, and so AMD is presuming this demand and bulking up this inventory, maybe taking some credit from its suppliers. So because of those reasons, the inventory is rising up. But I don't think so that is a problem. I think that is sort of a strategy that AMD is using to take on the market demand.
Okay. And Hamid, I want to just go back to the share price for a moment. And we can talk about the inventory in just a bit also. But before we do that, let's talk about share price is down quite a bit now. You know,
It is.
at what point would you feel like it's getting closer to something that's attractive? Or do you think this is disaster situation now and it's got a lot further to go?
I think they're in the same boat as Intel. The one thing that surprised me was when Intel went down, AMD's growth did not significantly climb, and I was expecting that. So that's one component that I'm looking at. The other component is the reason why Intel went down, which is they're a mixed environment, and guess what? So is AMD, and so that's going to start putting a lot of drag on their finances. And so while the top side is saying, "Hey, everything is fine," I think the bottom side tells you a better picture of what's going on.
Okay. And another question is, and you guys can respond and ask questions either, but I'm just going to put out a couple. Ayush mentioned about great management team, and I'm
Yes.
just curious, what would be your response to that, Hamid?
Well, I agree. In terms of, I think Ayush mentioned that the growth has been growing and it's ever positive, and that was one of their goals in bringing in the current CEO. However, when I'm looking at the rising inventory and then just doing some analysis on the cover, it looks like both NVIDIA and AMD have rising inventory growth. But then when you couple them with other predictors, other drags, you start to see that NVIDIA is more efficient, that it's sales and operational efficiency that are driving their inventories, whereas there are other layers in AMD, particularly with the payables elevated and dragging the day's inventory. Those are the things, those are the additional layers that I'm paying attention to that are just a different story than NVIDIA.
And let me ask you about inventory for a moment. Do you think that this inventory rise could be just driven by increasing prices of the raw materials and the things that they need? Or is this an accumulation of quantity?
My belief is it's an accumulation of both the pre-AI stock that they couldn't sell and they won't be able to sell, and they'll probably have to throw it in to, things like selling their data centers. Here's my data center plus 1 million chips I couldn't sell. And then the other component is going to be the new AI chips, where it's very difficult right now to see where that demand is, because we're just 80% of the market belongs to NVIDIA, and that's going to be the problem moving forward.
Okay, we got a question from DP, one of our current students. She's asking, how vulnerable is AMD to supply chain disruptions given its reliance on TSMC for chip fabrication? Which one of you guys wants to take that?
I think we'll both agree. Ayush, go ahead.
I agree. So I think it's true. TSMC has AMD is vulnerable to TSMC for its chip fabrication. But again, I think if you even look at the overall picture, I think TSMC is a Taiwan-based company, and US government is sort of in very much promotion of Taiwan. I think there even this like there's no problem with this dependence, as long as like US has a support of Taiwan. So
Was TSMC building a factory in the US, right? In New Mexico or something, Arizona?
There is discussion. I haven't seen any movement, but there's been constant discussion that there's something coming.
Okay.
Yes.
And we did get, just to give preference to the people that are sending in questions, we also got a question from Kritesh, another one of our students. How big is the demand from small scale businesses, value from money customers, which Ayush mentioned? Because don't you think that giants like OpenAI are the biggest customers? Ayush?
So I think this demand is starting to grow up. Like when DeepSeek started with this, because prior to this, there are small research labs. I am currently working in my university, and I daily see so research lab fighting for like the GPU is a virtual monopoly that Nvidia is currently having, because the kind of resources they have, no one else have, and typically there is a fight for this GPU in the open market. But as this computationally efficient way of training model has come in, it also has created this two market. One market for training models where Nvidia is clearly the best. Second is the inferential model. In inferential model, you basically take the pre-trained model and then you basically develop on that pre-trained model. This is where is the gold mine. This is where companies, small startups and small businesses could come in and take the advantage of this, and this is where AMD is currently fighting for.
And can I ask you about that in a little bit more detail?
Yes.
For instance, just because DeepSeek has come up with a computationally efficient way of doing things, does that mean that everybody else is doing that, or are they still stuck in older models, or they're forced to try to get more efficient? What does it mean?
They are picking up. Exactly, they are picking up. Everyone has noticed this, because if you have a way, and secondly, DeepSeek model is more open source compared to OpenAI, so more people are picking up. And secondly, you don't need the entire model of the DeepSeek to exactly train, because the inferential way is where you have a pre-trained model and then you use that baseline model to then train your things according to your need. Let's say you have a big chatbot just trained on thousands of data, and then you want to train something specific for your business needs. So then there's where you use this inferential model, and that's where we think, like I think AMD is picking up.
Okay, Hamid, you want to have any response to that or any other point?
Yeah, I'm also into AI as well. I'm sitting on a GeForce 3050 laptop, so I also am preferential to NVIDIA. The one thing that I'll say is there's two different markets. There's the hyperscaler markets, with which Ayush perfectly described what's going to happen in the future. But I disagree in terms of DeepSeek. I mean, just because things are more efficient doesn't mean that you're going to be going to AMD. For instance, if I was in that position, I'd just go get cheaper NVIDIA cards, because I can build what I need based on the available NVIDIA technology that's at a cheaper price. And it's using technology that I know is working. The CUDA framework is a phenomenal framework. Everybody's been building on CUDA, and that's the reason why NVIDIA is ahead. They had a 10 to 15 year head start.
So, Ayush, any final comments of our Q&A session?
Yes, I think even in this market, there is because AMD, according to my opinion, provides more value for money. It's true that Nvidia has some setups which makes it very easy for developers, like the CUDA framework. But again, if you are getting value for money, if you are getting something uh, at a very cheaper price compared to what Nvidia is doing, and in a market, again, the thing is, if Nvidia is winning, it doesn't mean that AMD is losing, because the demand is huge and there is not much supply. So if there is such a big demand and there is only one company, and that company is making a virtual monopoly on that, there is going to be players who would be coming to AMD to pick up for their needs.
Okay. So we're going to end the Q&A session. So I'm going to take you guys out for just a second and we'll come right back. 1 second. So that was the Q&A session, and a lot of good back and forth there for sure. And now it's time for closing arguments in this valuation masterclass debate. Remember, the valuation masterclass debate is sponsored by Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. If you want to build a competitive advantage in company valuation, join us in the Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp and learn the skills that Hamid and Ayush are demonstrating very, very well. So now we're going to go with Ayush to come in and it's time for your closing argument. So as soon as you start speaking, I'm going to start the timer and then I'm going to exit. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So it was a really great and a fun debate having with Hamid, and I got to know some great points. But again, even building on top of that, I feel strongly that AMD, for number one, the stock price is very, it's it's really at a deep discount, and it's the right time to buy AMD. Number one. Secondly, the market, again reiterating on the point that market is overemphasizing on Nvidia versus AMD. So, for example, yesterday, Nvidia, when Nvidia's stock price reports came, Nvidia fell by 8.5%, and for no reason, AMD also fell by 5% because people are directly comparing these businesses. And the reason was that Nvidia's gross profit margin for next quarter, the overall estimates are low. So again, I'm thinking the market is fragmented. The market is looking at multiple lenses, and none of these lenses are clear. So and the overall valuation for AMD is really very great. The company is growing. The company is growing in all the major segments. It has a potential opportunity where it can really pick up in one niche of the AI market. And I really feel that the strong leadership provided by Lisa Su and the fabulous management of AMD is going to ride the challenges. They have taken the tide before. They have taken on giants like Intel before this AI race, and it is clearly winning in that race. And I think at some point it has taken up this race against Nvidia, and it will find the right market, and it will find the right people to sell it to, and become a great company, and the stock price is going to rise fabulously.
When you say fabulously in your closing argument, you just said that. What do you think? How much upside potential do you think there is, roughly, in AMD?
I think right now it's 40%. So I predict a stock price of 140.
Okay. I'm going to take you out and bring in Hamid for his closing statements. Then I'll bring you guys back in for a few minutes. So hold on one second. All right. Well, it's time for your closing arguments. I'm going to exit and you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Ayush. Thank you, Andrew, for this wonderful opportunity. I do agree. It's not just about AMD and NVIDIA, but that creates more challenges because you've got different fab and fabless designers just competing into the market. And I just described to you some of the concerns on the bottom line: inventory pileups, elevated AP, sales lagging on inventory versus the revenue growth driving the inventory. To me, that sounds like poor cash flow problems that you're going to see soon, maybe even some write-offs of pre-AI chips and maybe existing chips that aren't selling. And then, of course, they're talking about selling data centers. And the other component is that it's not just CPUs and GPUs coming around the corner. It's also going to be ARM chips as well, again, driving more competition to a struggling AMD mixed market. And then the last component is AMD's PE is twice NVIDIA's today. So to me, that tells me the stock doesn't have a bottom yet. I think it's going to continue to go down, and analysts are going to try to figure out where the value of the existing inventory is going to be, and then how to derive what the value is based on the existing mixed markets and how poorly the gaming and client and embedded segments are performing.
Excellent closing arguments. Let me bring Ayush back in. So that wraps up our debate. And in the future, we're going to have the audience voting and all of that. But for right now, so how did you feel about how the debate went?
It was a lot of fun. Lot of fun.
Like Hamid really brought up some interesting points, and it was fun, like knowing the other perspective of the entire debate and having the holistic view of the stock.
Yep.
And do you think you could have done it before you went through the valuation masterclass?
No.
For me, no. I learned so much in the last 3 months of I started with the boot camp and then got through the professionals. I think it was a fabulous experience. The entire building up of the valuation, I couldn't do it without the masterclass.
Same here. There's no way I would be arguing bottom side points before the masterclass. No way.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about your style before you came to the
Mhm.
boot camp. And yeah, one of the things that I love about the debates is that it's time to put it into practice. Like
Yep.
the valuation masterclass is already as practical as I can get it, particularly professional. But really what it comes down to is this debate. And I think that one of the reasons why I like to do this debate is because I also see that most people, we're all living in a bubble now.
Yes.
And it is just, we are fed what we believe
Yes.
through social media by the algorithms. They'll lose money if they start feeding us stuff that we don't like or we don't believe. And so we're in a bubble, and it's hard to get the other side of the argument. But any smart investor knows that you got to get both sides of the argument. And so that's what I love about this. It's practical, and it's getting both sides of the argument out there so that somebody that is considering AMD has got, good points to research and think about.
Yeah, the internet made the world smaller, and now you have the opportunity for, in economics, we call it asymmetric information. And so it's useful to have programs like this where you can even that out and really start to analyze and do deep dives into the three financial statements.
In fact, I read so much about the U.S. Civil War, and it was very common for generals to feed misinformation to the newspaper reporters to say that they were doing better than they thought, with the hope that that information would convince the population to support the war effort from the North or the South, wherever the
That's right.
the general. And we know that propaganda like that has been used, over the ages, because if you can get the people behind you, then you potentially have more people that will volunteer to join because they think you're winning and the like. But what was different in those days is that those generals knew they were lying.
Yes.
But now, what I've observed, particularly in the case of Ukraine, I actually think that the generals believe their propaganda. And if that's the case, now we got a real problem, because we have politicians that are actually believing the misinformation that they're spreading on either side. And so one of the great benefits of this type of debate is, if you are on one side and firmly believe that you're right and you get to hear the other side, then you can learn. And one of the things that happens is that they try to block off, for instance, Russian news from the Russian side of the argument in America. It just doesn't exist. You can't listen to that. And so this just really brings up what I think is super valuable. So it's awesome. All right. Any final words before we end?
Sign up for the program. It's awesome stuff. Do it. Read
Yeah.
the materials, read the earning statements, everything. Do your homework, watch the videos, and you're going to go from somebody like me that didn't really know very much on the financial side to being able to present here before this audience. Sign up.
I also feel the same. It was, I think, the most transformative 3 months for me. So for everyone who is currently watching and part of this boot camp, part of the professionals program, I think take the benefit of this. I think this is one of the things that will really transform you. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Be
And
part
there's
of it.
so much improvement coming in Boot Camp 20. You want to
Yes.
hear some of the things that are coming?
What's that?
Number one, what I did is I went through 2,000 companies across the world looking for companies that I thought were good and are cheap. And so I think we're going to have an interesting mix of companies that have real potential to go up, 2-3 times. And we're going to see how the students interpret that. And that's going to be interesting, because a lot of times in the boot camp, we do focus on bigger companies because, it's the big name and all that. But most of those bigger companies are already overvalued. And so
Yes.
what fun is it to do evaluation and then say, well, it's a sell. So I'm trying to deal with that a little bit by mixing in more of companies that I think are cheap. And so that's going to be interesting, and see where that goes. The other improvement that we're making is that we've been working on improving our weekly assignment video. And I think, Hamid, we may not even had it when you were in, but now, instead of me explaining at the end of each live session on Monday what you got to do, we've now separated that into a separate video, and that video explains everything that you've got to do. But we've been developing that, and so it's much more clear, the weekly assignments. And that way, when we get to Feedback Friday, what we end up with is much more discussion about the quality of the argument rather than, well, you got wrong formatting here or there. And that has been a great improvement that I can feel, and it makes it more fun for me on Fridays to really get into the arguments. But the second part about it, and this comes from AG, who's been working with us recently, was she's like, we really don't explain how. We explain what we want, but how. And so she's been working on upgrading some of our explanations of how you build a story, how you do this, how you come up with this. And so that's something that we're going to test and roll out on Monday in our first weekly assignment. So what you got to do and how you got to do it. And that's a huge improvement. Now, the third improvement that I'm working on, and this one is a hard one, I think we're going to prototype it in Bootcamp 20, and that is using something like Notion to come up with a master document of everything that we want students to learn in the whole Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp, and then build that out for the students so that each student has their own document that's a living document. And then when we have a cheat sheet that we give out, instead of saying, download this PDF, which we can still have, but it's going to be embedded in the document so that all of your notes and everything that you keep is going to be in one document. And I think that that's going to allow students to have everything in one place. So when they finish and they graduate, now they've got a Google Doc or a Notion doc that is a living document they can upgrade and all that they can print out. And that is everything that they learned in the Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. So that's the third thing that we're working on. There's a few other smaller things, but those are three things. What do you think?
Sounds like you transformed. Yeah.
I think Notion is a great idea.
I'm sorry, Ayush. Let me just throw in one thing. Really funny thing is I remember the days when we would come into the meetings and we were kicking out AI, and it sounds like you have now been exposed to the point where you have to take in AI. So I apologize, Ayush. Please.
Yeah. Nope. Yep. Ayush?
I feel Notion is a really great idea. Even I would want a piece of that if that's okay. And
yeah, I mean, that the Notion is amazing. And I think I had another student of mine recently. His name is Ukrit in Thailand. And I went to visit him at his office, and after he graduated, and he said, here, I have a notebook LM, and I've uploaded all of your PDFs into here. And any question I have, I just type in and ask you through this. And he said, go ahead and ask an obscure number or obscure question that only you would be talking about, like the pizza breakdown of the weighted average cost of capital and, how to look at that. And I typed that in, and boom, up came my answer. And so I think that we can use Notebook LM or other tools that I just don't know enough about, but be able to provide 24/7 resource. So when students are asking questions, they can be answered. So that's pretty exciting too. So if you guys know about those things, feel free to help us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, LLMs are, as I shared before, I'm sitting on an NVIDIA GPU just so that I can have a personal assistant. So I'm pretty sure Ayush is going to say the same thing. I mean, it's like having a tutor next to you and answering every single question you absolutely have. So it just makes productivity move much, much faster.
Yeah, and we these are big improvements, and I just see so much opportunity in the Valuation Masterclass. And really, to me, I'm living my dream because I'm taking, what I love. And, I would say that when I was your age, or let's say when I first started out, I was all about the company. Doing company research turned me on extremely well. I loved it. But when I became a head of research, I said, my job is no longer picking stocks, it's picking analysts.
Yep.
And if I can pick the best team of analysts, then my stock picking is taken care of. I can do my own, fine, but the stock picking of the analyst team is taken care of. And what I now basically say is that my goal now is to help so many people build their skills. So it's like I've gone from company to managing a team to training people to help them build their skills. And so it's a great progression for me where I've stayed involved, but in the way that interests me. And now my biggest objective over the next year or two is I see the opportunity to build a distributed research platform where we can have analysts across the world. If we wanted to cover 10 Canadian companies, I just go out and get 100 students from Canada and find 2 of them that want to cover those companies. They're on the ground and they're producing that research in our value model and in our framework that we already have. So what the client is going to see is a very consistent output and framework and systematic way of looking at it. And if I want to bring out research on Indonesia, I bring in, or China, I bring in students and see which ones want to work from home and work on that. And all of a sudden I have the ability now to build a global research operation that's on the ground without any on the ground resources. And that's just a step way beyond where all the brokers and investment banks are. And I think we can provide a great service with that. So that's exciting.
Yeah, scale and integration. That's the name of the game today.
And so I think that if we look at small and mid cap companies, maybe the space where we could really make a difference to say, and I think that also we can get funding from stock exchanges and the like who want to see more. Take a look at India. India's got 7,000 companies. I don't even know how many it has these days, but 6,500 of them are not liquid and they're small and there's no coverage. Brokers aren't going to cover it because they're not getting volume. But if we can build a system that can scale and cover these small and mid-sized companies, eventually they will become mid-sized and large companies over time, and that can be valuable to investors. So much opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is the beginning of the age of the non-FANG, the non-big tech, where everybody else gets to see some growth and opportunity. So AI, I think, unlock that, and so you're going to just see a lot of healthy companies start to grow. And so if you have a team where you're capturing that before the growth happens, then that's a big moat that you're talking about.
Yeah, and Ayush, we may have to partner with your university and all that you guys are doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yep. And Hamid, you in the US. Anyways, I'm going to go sit down with my mom for dinner for a little bit. And but I just want to thank you both for taking the time. I know Hamid is very early, and I know Ayush that both of you guys had to put in some time to give such a great debate. But I think you also have given a great example and power of example to incoming students. We also have students that are in the process of getting through professional right now, and they're aspiring to do a debate. And so we're getting more and more of the debates coming on. And most importantly, I want to invite both of you guys. You find a stock that you think is a strong buy or a strong sell, throw it into the debate group and see if we can find someone on the other side. And that is what makes a market, buyers and sellers. So
that's right.
Great to see you both, and we'll keep in touch on Slack. And for everybody that attended and all the people that asked questions, we appreciate you, and hopefully we'll see you in the Valuation Masterclass Bootcamp. See you guys.
Thanks, guys. See you, world.
Yep. Well, that was amazing. I really felt like that was a huge opportunity for us to learn about AMD. And I think that really what we got from both Ayush and Hamid was fantastic. And so, again, if you want to build a competitive advantage in company valuation, then join us at valuationmasterclass.com. I'll see you.